Have you ever walked out of a meeting kind of frustrated? Like maybe you think like this was a total waste of time. I bet you it's because there wasn't a decision made, or people didn't value your input or even listen to you, or perhaps there's no next steps. I've been there. My name is Werner Puchert, and I believe that most of the world's problems are just interesting design challenges in disguise. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about decision making, and then, as always, I have an interesting tool that helps a little bit with decision making and makes it more visual here in the physical world. Before I get into the tool, now I don't know if you remember these. So if you're an old guy like me, when I was a junior strategist, I used to have to sit and cut all these out for workshops, because at some stage, and this still happens today, there's a whole bunch of ideas and things on the wall, and we need to make a decision. We need to prioritize these ideas, we need to throw some things away and then make a decision. So hopefully you actually get to that point. We assign a whole bunch of these little sticky dots, and you'll have your ideas up on the wall, and then folks will walk around with their assigned dots and then add a dot to indicate how much they loved a specific idea. And then of course, as easy as pie, democracy in action, you go back and then tally all the votes, and then you have your decision in place. There's a couple of flaws here. The first flaw is that it's not really confidential. Subconsciously, you start following someone else who is more senior to you, and you start voting what they're voting, so it starts to skew. The other one is quite a challenge, and if you have a team that's on fire, is there a ton of ideas. And as you know, as Amazon has proven, is that if you give someone too many choices, you're going to put them out of action, and people can't really make a clear decision. The other one, and this is kind of illustrated here on my silly little illustration here, is that sometimes you get vote splitting. It's either or. There's no real clear winner here. In the digital world, we have some ways to work around it. So for example, in Mural, you have this kind of ability of voting for things and for specific things, and you can lay out things in a different way. Also, you have a little bit of a time pressure, and that vote is private. Now for this video, I'm going to step a little bit out of the digital space and go into the physical world. And I'm going to introduce a hefty box. It's called feedback frames. You can find them at feedbackframes.com. It's a tool created by Diceman, and it's something that I always wanted to get my hands on, and boy, I wasn't disappointed. The idea behind feedback frames is to take the voting mechanism or decision-making mechanism and make it more fair, more clear, and more measurable. So let me stop holding out on you and let's crack open this box. So inside the box contains 8 feedback frames and all the material that supports it. In the cover lid here, you'll see a whole bunch of instructions, so it's easy to kind of get going fast. And even if you have to hand it over to a co-facilitator, then each of the boxes with the 8 stands and units contain 320 voting tokens. There's an envelope with a whole bunch of documents and also a nice rundown of what's inside the box. So inside the envelope, you have 9 frame covers. They have one extra one spare one. You have the scaling sheets over here that slides into the frame. And then also you have your 2 statement sheets. I'll talk about the statement sheets a little bit later. Without further ado, let's assemble one of the feedback frames so you can see what it looks like. Okay, the assembly is pretty straightforward. Even a South African guy like me can do it. You just rip out this extra little piece here, swing this closed, and then pop this back in just to give it and make it a little bit more sturdy. And then you have a nice little frame stand here, and then the rating sheet that slides into a pocket at the back of the frame, and get that in place. And then of course the idea is that the frame then fits onto the stand, and then of course I have a piece missing, and this is where the frame covers come in, because you drop that over and now your whole voting process is confidential because no one can see what's going on behind here. And then you will lay out your whole room where you're going to do the voting with a whole bunch of these. The frame and the stand is made out of paper, out of cardboard. It's quite sturdy and strong. It's not going anywhere. So you can use them with confidence. The functionality is pretty simple. The voting process really comes down to assigning tokens to your participants in your session, and then getting them in front of an idea. At the end of the voting session, you have folks then actually come and then reveal the voting, and then you can see what it looks like. And the way that it's put together and it allows the tokens to fall in, you can just imagine if you have a lot of voting going on, that the feedback itself, the visual kind of response to it is quite interesting. So let's talk a little bit about the statement sheet. You'll have all your frames laid out, and then for each frame, there's a specific corresponding statement sheet. So on the statement sheet, you have a couple of areas here. The first one is that you can add your code of your frame in here. So UBJ. So for auditing later on, you know exactly how to put these things together again. And then of course, there's a space to add the statement. How much do you love Vanner South African accent in this example. And then what is interesting here is that Jason then recommends that when people vote, they drop a token, that they make a little signature so that you can once again audit back a little bit. And of course, the one that I like really at the bottom here is like you can contextualize your decision a little bit. So for example, if you make a vote in a certain way, you don't have to reveal your specific vote, but you can actually make some additional suggestions. You can say what you think is great about it, strengths and opportunities, but then of course you can add some concerns and challenges. Perhaps you can say, I love his accent, but he's speaking too fast. So you can add comments here. So each person will come through, drop their vote, and then fill out this sheet as they go through the whole voting process. As a facilitator, you can then come back, and then as you reveal the votes, you then have an opportunity to add a date and what event it was. Then of course you can actually then tally up the votes and put in the count. So for example, strong agreement 4, and you put 4, there was 4 votes for it, and then 2 in agreement, 4 folks stayed neutral, and then 3 people who disagreed on this one. Now you have a document in your hand that you can go back to, and Jason has made the actual Excel spreadsheet available on his website, so you can go download there if you want to tally the actual results digitally. The other thing that I also want to point out is that you do get a scaling sheet for each of the frames in the actual set, but you can also go to the website and then design or download different templates. Maybe you want to use 5 or star ratings, or maybe you want to create your own custom voting. I mean, as I mentioned before or demonstrated, this is just a piece of paper that slides in the back. Also, of course, the actual cover sheet that you put across the top here, there's some additional or alternative downloads or templates you can download on the website. So in a way, it's kind of also interesting that you could really customize the feedback frame to suit your kind of, or the information that you want to get out of the participants in your workshops. So to be honest, Jason had me sold on this product from the get-go. I just love the idea that it's tangible, it's interactive, and the fact that you can keep things confidential and people can interact with it, and also the fact you can customize by just adding different kinds of sheets to it. However, I think I sold the product short slightly. The other element that I think makes the feedback frames interesting is the fact that it also visualizes the voting in a bit more of a concrete way. So for example, let's go back to my little accent joke. Now, if I got a voting kind of a result like this, I can visually see in a very clear way that folks are kind of agreeing with the statement. There's a definite leaning towards, yes, this statement is correct. However, let's say the voting looked like this. Now you have a lot of people voting on this side in strong agreement, and there's a whole bunch of people voting here in strong disagreement. This shows you that there's definite polarization going on. I mean, the result of this could be that maybe your statement is a little bit weak or confusing, or maybe the idea is just not a good one to pursue. Then, of course, you have something that's kind of like neither agree or disagree about this. This is kind of like a neutral kind of result to this. And you probably have to then once again go back and reassess your statement, reassess kind of why you got to this point to run the voting in the first place. So there's definitely a lot more value to the feedback frame's visual aspect than I gave it credit to in the beginning. Then a final feature that I would like to talk about is that you can also use different color tokens. So for example, when you do a design sprint, there is the idea of veto rights. So a certain person, perhaps a product manager or a senior individual, does have the ability to tilt a vote in a certain direction. That's not necessarily wrong. So if you use different color tokens for different roles, it's also interesting to see how those different roles can break things down, and you can get a nice visual indication of where certain groups of people in your team actually lean. So yes, the feedback frames is an exciting, tangible, physical thing that you can drop tokens into, and it's just revealing the results is always awesome. However, the other thing is there's a little bit more depth to it, and I think that is really interesting to explore. Okay, cool. So before you vote me off the island, we looked at feedback frames. This is a box with a unit of 8 feedback frames. Thanks to Jason Diceman from feedbackframes.com. You can go check out the content. There's some interesting ideas being shared there, and of course you can buy the product there. And then I would love to know from you, do you have any interesting concepts, ideas, specifically around the idea of decision making? And also perhaps, I think there's some interesting concepts here in the feedback frames that we could translate into the digital world. How would you go about doing that? And then I just want to say thank you for watching this. And as always, catch you in the comments.